Welcome back to Carolina Journal Radio. I'm Mitch Kokai. The taxpayers in a community pay the bills for the local government, but very few of those taxpayers play a role in writing the budget that generates those bills. That's usually left to an elected board and its professional staff. But there is a growing movement called participatory budgeting, or PB, and our next guest is here to discuss it. Dr. Whitney Afonso is Associate Professor of Public Administration and Government at the UNC School of Government. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, participatory budgeting. Tell us what this is all about.
So, participatory budgeting, or PB as I will call it, is really the process where the government will allocate a certain amount of dollars to the community, solicit proposals and project ideas from the community directly, and then after deciding on and finding out which ones are the most popular, and then vetting those projects to see if they are doable, feasible, legal, and within the allotted amount of money, they put them forward for direct vote from citizens and residents, which may be broadly defined in their community. And so ultimately, the citizens both generate the ideas and then select which projects will be funded by government.
Governments have been making budgets for hundreds of years. This is a relatively recent phenomenon.
It is. It started in the late 1980s in a small town in Brazil, who allocated quite a bit of its budget to the PB process, 17% in fact. And so in Brazil, it has become very common. 3% of jurisdictions and municipalities in Brazil have some sort of PB, and it has been relatively quickly spreading internationally. Over 1,500 communities have PB in place, and in the U.S., we're seeing it become more and more common. The first case of PB was in Chicago in one of the wards in 2009, and now it has gone throughout the country, and we now have even two cities doing PB in North Carolina, Greensboro and Durham.
We'll talk a little bit about the local Greensboro and Durham connection in just a bit, but let's talk about what are seen as some of the potential benefits of doing this. Why would anyone, especially those who are in control of the dollars, why would they want to give up some of that control?
So, participatory budgeting, like a lot of forms of citizen engagement, has quite a few goals and quite a few things that it's trying to accomplish. Advocates of participatory budgeting say that this is a way to involve citizens, often that have never had positive experiences and interactions with government, in a process that gives them control and an autonomy in this process. Also, it really comes down to identifying pressing needs, preferences, and even potentially innovations from your citizens. They know what they want, they know what they're missing, and PB gives them a way to have that voice heard.
We're speaking with Dr. Whitney Afonso, who is a professor at the UNC School of Government. As someone who looks at these types of issues, you've also seen that there can be some potential concerns about PB. What are some of those?
So first of all, is it necessary? Governments have a lot of ways that they actively are engaging with citizens already. In many places, this may already be giving grants to community projects or having neighborhood councils to make sure that it's not just the squeaky wheel that is getting the grease, which is one of the concerns of any type of citizen engagement, to be frank. But beyond that, often we're seeing relatively minor investments. There are quite a few limitations to what we can do with PB. Typically, it's capital projects, so that it's just a one-term cost, some sort of small infrastructure. And that's because it's not a commitment from the government to be funding this project for many years. So we limit it to one term, 1 year, one annual project. Also, because sometimes these dollars are not immense, it's very small projects. We see a lot of community gardens. We see playground equipment. And while those things are wonderful and there is demand for citizens to be investing in these communities, is this the best use of those dollars? The opportunity cost of that money is a big one. It's taking time and staff resources from government. It's taking time and resources from citizens to engage. And if we're getting small changes that may not be making a big impact, there are those that question whether this is the best use of our time and dollars.
Greensboro and Durham, at least at this point, have decided this is a good use of some of the tax dollars. Tell us a little bit about what has been learned in those two communities.
So Greensboro and Durham have done it actually relatively differently. Both have done a traditional participatory budgeting model. Greensboro actually is the first city in the southeast United States to adopt participatory budgeting, and they give $100,000 to each of their 5 districts. And that way they can make sure that it's not just one district's needs that are dominating the entire budget process, but they have limited to $100,000. And so they have gone through 2 cycles at this point, and they're getting inclusive playground equipment, bus shelters and covered bus shelters, solar charging stations in parks, projects like that that are absolutely meeting community needs and have been identified by the community, but are that typical small infrastructure piece. Durham only recently started theirs in 2018, and they are currently implementing the projects that have won in their first cycle. They, however, went and dedicated $2.4 million. So each of their zones is getting $800,000. So what you've seen come out of Durham are actually larger scale projects. They have allowed for some citywide projects to emerge, youth centers, technology for some of the public schools. And so what you might consider bigger ticket items coming out of Durham. But once again, the one-time costs and largely for capital.
As an expert and a scholar, what are some of the things about participatory budgeting that you're going to be watching as these two communities and maybe some others in North Carolina look at this?
So I think one of the important things to keep an eye on is engagement. One of the many goals of participatory budgeting is to engage citizens. You also hope that it's going to lead to innovations and better outcomes with those budget dollars, but one of the goals really is to build relationships with citizens. And so you need to be very mindful of what parts of the populations are being reached, which parts of the populations maybe aren't engaging with the process. Are you finding that you're getting more engagement as time grows on and more strategic choices being made that maybe build off of each other? Or is participation starting to wane? In some communities that have had a PB process, there's low-hanging fruit that people are excited about to get done, but in the years following it, interest tends to get thinner and fewer people engage with the process. And so that's not true everywhere. New York, for example, they are increasing participation, but you want to be mindful of what trajectory your community is on and make sure you're accomplishing the goals that you as a government have laid out, but also what goals your citizens want out of this process.
Well, it's certainly a very interesting topic, and we know that one person who's going to be watching very closely as Greensboro, Durham, and other communities move forward with participatory budgeting, or PB, is Dr. Whitney Afonso, Associate Professor of Public Administration and Government at the UNC School of Government. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.